The cold metal corridors of Research Station Omega-7 hummed with an alien energy that made the walls vibrate softly. Deep in the outer rim of the galaxy, the station floated in the darkness like a massive silver needle. Inside its belly, 12. Human prisoners sat in energy cages that glowed blue around their bodies. Captain Hyun-woo Park pressed his back against the wall of his cell and watched the alien guards move past his cage. Their bodies were tall and thin like stretched shadows. Their skin looked like gray metal, and their eyes were large black circles that never seemed to blink. The guards had not spoken to the humans since bringing them here 3 days ago. Hyun-woo looked across the holding area at his crew. Engineer Bo-ra Kim sat cross-legged in her cage, her eyes closed as if she was thinking about something far away. Medic Dong-hyun Lee was checking the small cuts on his hands from when the aliens had grabbed him from their ship. Young Jaemin Kong sat in the corner of his cage with his knees pulled up to his chest. The boy was only 22 years old, and this was his first deep space mission. The captain felt the weight of responsibility sit heavy on his shoulders. These people trusted him to bring them home safely. Now they were prisoners of the Galactic Council, and Hyun-woo did not know what the aliens wanted from them. The human exploration ship had been mapping new star systems when the alien vessels appeared. They came out of nowhere like ghosts in space. The alien ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. They surrounded the small human vessel and used some kind of energy beam to stop its engines. The aliens had boarded the ship and taken the crew without explaining why. Now the humans waited in their glowing cages, while strange aliens in dark robes moved through the station. Hyun-woo had seen many different types of aliens during the 3 days. Some were tall with too many arms. Others had scales instead of skin. Some walked on 4 legs instead of 2. But they all had the same look in their eyes when they stared at the humans. It was the look someone gives to an interesting bug before stepping on it. The station shook slightly as something large docked with it. The alien guards suddenly stood, straighter, and moved away from the human cages. Even these gray-skinned creatures seemed nervous about whatever was arriving. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The sound was different from the soft padding of the alien guards. These steps were slow and deliberate, like someone who had all the time in the universe and knew how to use it. A new figure appeared in the doorway of the holding area. This alien was unlike the others. Its body was covered in what looked like living crystal that caught the light and threw it back in strange colors. The crystal grew in patterns across its skin like a tree made of gemstones. Where other aliens had normal arms and legs, this creature had long, flexible appendages that moved like tentacles but looked like crystal vines. The most disturbing thing about the newcomer was its face. It had features that almost looked human, but wrong in ways that made Hyun-woo's skin crawl. The nose was too long, the mouth too wide, and the eyes were pools of silver liquid that reflected everything around them like mirrors. The creature moved with confidence through the holding area. It studied each human prisoner with those liquid silver eyes, taking its time to examine them from different angles. When it looked at Hyun-woo, the captain felt something cold touch the edge of his mind, like ice water dripping into his thoughts. Behind the crystal creature came a group of aliens that Hyun-woo recognized as council members. They wore long robes that covered most of their bodies, but he could see different types of faces under their hoods. One had skin that looked like tree bark. Another had a head shaped like a bird's skull. They all watched the crystal creature, with what seemed like respect mixed with fear. The crystal alien finally spoke. Its voice sounded like wind chimes being played by a gentle breeze, but the words came out in perfect human language. I am Vexhai of the Mind Redder caste. I have come to learn what your species knows about war, about your cities, about how many of you exist in this galaxy. The creature's liquid eyes fixed on Hyun-woo. I have never failed to extract information from a thinking being. Your minds will give me everything I need to know about humanity. Pilot Sujin Choi shifted in her cage and spoke for the first time since their capture. What gives you the right to invade our thoughts? Vex-Hai turned, those mirror eyes toward her. Right is a concept for species that have power. You are 12 beings from a race we have never encountered. Your small ship wandered into our territory without permission. The Council needs to know if your kind represents a threat. We're explorers, not soldiers, Hyunwoo said, standing up in his cage. We came in peace to map new systems. Peace. Vex-Hai repeated the word like it was something strange and new. An interesting concept. I have looked into the minds of 67 different species, Captain Park. I have seen their thoughts about peace. Most think about it right before they plan their wars. The crystal tendrils on Vex-Hai's head began to glow with a soft blue light. I will start with the youngest. Fear often makes young minds easier to read. The creature moved toward Jaemin's cage. The young man tried to press himself further into the corner, but there was nowhere to go. His eyes were wide with terror, and his hands shook as he gripped his knees. "Leave him alone," Hyunwoo said, moving to the front of his own cage. "If you want information, take it from me. I'm the captain." Vex-Hai paused and looked back at Hyunwoo with what might have been amusement. "Admirable, but unnecessary. I will examine all of you in time. The young one's mind will be simpler. A good place to begin understanding your species." The council members moved closer to observe. One of them, the alien with bark-like skin, spoke in a voice that sounded like creaking wood. Vex-Hai has never encountered a mind it could not read completely. Your thoughts will be like open books. 300 years, added the bird skull alien in a voice like grinding stone. 3 centuries of perfect success. Every secret, every hidden thought, every buried memory brought to light. Vex-Hai nodded slowly. Your species will be cataloged and classified within the hour. If you pose no threat, you may be allowed to return to your home world with a warning to stay within your own territory. If you do represent danger to the Council— The creature did not finish the sentence. The alien reached out with one of its crystal tendrils toward Jaemin's cage. The energy barrier flickered and disappeared. The young man tried to move away, but Vex-Hai's appendage stretched like liquid crystal and touched his forehead. "This will not harm you," Vex-Hai said in that wind chime voice. "I am simply going to look inside your mind and see what humans think about." The crystal tendril made contact with Jaemin's skin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Vex-Hai's liquid silver eyes suddenly went wide. The alien's body went rigid, and the crystal formations on its skin began to pulse with rapid flashes of different colors. Something was wrong. The council members moved forward with concern in their alien voices. Vex-Hai made a sound that was part gasp and part musical note played on a broken instrument. The crystal creature jerked its tendril away from Jaemin's head and staggered backward. For the first time since arriving at the station, Vex-Hai looked uncertain. The alien's liquid eyes swirled like disturbed mercury. "What did you see?" demanded the bark-skinned council member. Vex-Hai stared at Jaemin, then at all the other humans, with something that looked like confusion and maybe even fear. I need to try again," the creature said, but its wind-chime voice now carried a tremor that had not been there before. In his cage, young Jaemin Kang sat quietly, unharmed, but somehow different. He looked up at the alien interrogator with eyes that held depths no one had expected to find there. The real interrogation was about to begin. Vex-Hai stared at the young human named Jaemin Kang with those liquid silver eyes that now swirled like storms. The crystal formations across the alien's body pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. For 300 years, Vex-Hai Had never encountered a mind it could not read like words on a page. But something had just gone very wrong. The council members moved closer to their champion interrogator. The bark-skinned alien spoke first, its voice creaking like old wood in the wind. "What happened, Vex-High? Why did you pull away?" Vex-High turned, those disturbed mirror eyes toward the council. The contact was unexpected. The young one's mind is not organized like others I have encountered. I need to try again with more preparation. The Bird Skull Council member tilted its head at an angle that would have broken a human neck. You have never needed preparation before. Every species thinks in patterns you can follow. What makes these humans different? Nothing, Vex-High said quickly, but the crystal tendrils on its head still flickered with uncertain light. They are just another primitive species. I was simply caught off guard by their chaotic mental structure. Captain Hyun-woo watched this exchange with growing hope. Something about human minds had shaken the confident alien interrogator. He did not understand what, but any advantage was worth protecting. Perhaps, Hyun-woo said loudly, you should give up and send us home. Save yourself the embarrassment of failing in front of your council. Vex-High turned toward the human captain with renewed determination. The alien's crystal skin brightened with authority and power. I do not fail, Captain. Park, I will simply approach this more carefully. Vex-High moved back toward Jaemin's cage. The young man looked up at the approaching alien with eyes that held more depth than any council member had expected to see. Jaemin was scared, but he was also thinking about many other things at the same time. This time I will go deeper, Vex-High announced to the watching council. Whatever mental barriers this species has developed, I will break through them. The crystal tendril extended once again toward Jaemin's forehead. The young human did not try to pull away this time. He sat still and watched the alien appendage approach his skin. Contact. This time, Vex-High was prepared for chaos, but what the alien found in Jaemin's mind was beyond any definition of chaos it had ever imagined. The human brain was not just disorganized. It was running dozens of completely separate thought processes at exactly the same time. While Jaemin sat in his cage being afraid of the alien interrogator, he was also remembering the last conversation he had with his sister before leaving Earth. At the same time, his mind was composing a letter to his parents that he might never get to send. Simultaneously, he was analyzing the crystal structure of Vex-High's skin and wondering if it was grown or manufactured. But there was more. Much more. Part of Jaemin's consciousness was replaying a song his grandmother used to sing when he was small. Another part was calculating the mathematical probability of the human crew ever seeing Earth again. Yet another section of his mind was designing improvements to the ship's engine systems based on observations of alien technology. All of these thoughts ran at the same time without interfering with each other. It was like watching a dozen different movies playing on the same screen without any of the images blending together. Vex-High tried to follow one thread of thought, but it immediately connected to 17 other ideas. The memory of Jaemin's sister led to thoughts about family, which connected to concepts of loyalty, which branched into philosophical questions about duty, which split into emotional responses about homesickness, which tied back to technical specifications about long-range communication systems. Every single thought in the human mind was connected to every other thought in ways that created an infinite web of mental activity. Vex-High felt like it was trying to drink from a waterfall while standing in the middle of an earthquake. The alien interrogator pushed deeper, determined to find the simple military information it needed. Instead, it discovered that Jaemin was simultaneously worried about his crew, curious about alien biology, homesick for Korean food, annoyed by the texture of his uniform, fascinated by the energy cage technology, and composing a mental poem about the color of starlight. Even worse, each of these thoughts was connected to emotions that the young human felt with an intensity that made Vex-High's crystal skin burn. Jae-min did not just think about his sister. He loved her with a feeling so strong it created heat in his neural pathways. He did not just remember his grandmother's song. He carried the warmth and safety of childhood in every note, and that warmth connected to his hopes for the future and his determination to survive. Vex-High had interrogated species that were stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than humans. But none of them thought with this kind of emotional intensity while simultaneously processing dozens of unrelated concepts. The alien tried to grab hold of one clear thought, but human consciousness was like trying to hold water with a net. Every time Vex-High focused on one idea, it immediately flowed into 10 other directions that each connected to 10 more possibilities. The most disturbing discovery was that Jae-min's mind contained things that did not exist. The young human was not just remembering and analyzing. He was creating new ideas that had never existed before. While sitting in his cage, part of his consciousness was inventing a new type of music that combined alien harmonics with human rhythm. Another part was designing spacecraft that could fold space in ways no one had ever attempted. Human imagination was not just memory or calculation. It was the active creation of possibilities that had never been real. Jae-min's mind contained entire worlds that existed only in thought, complete with detailed physics, history, and cultures. Vex-High felt its own consciousness beginning to strain, under the pressure of trying to process human thought patterns. The alien's liquid silver eyes began to spin faster as it tried to make sense of the impossible complexity. Then, Jae-min did something that broke Vex-High's concentration completely. While being interrogated by the most feared mind reader in the galaxy, while sitting in an alien prison far from home, while facing possible death or torture, the young human began to feel sorry for his interrogator. Jae-min could sense Vex-High's confusion and frustration through their mental connection. Instead of being happy that the alien was struggling, the young man felt genuine sympathy for a creature that was trying so hard to understand something beyond its experience. This compassion was not logical. Vex-High was his enemy, his captor, the being that would decide the fate of humanity based on what it found in human minds. But Jae-min felt sorry for it anyway, because that was what humans did. They felt empathy even for those who meant them harm. The combination of chaos, creativity, emotion, and illogical compassion finally overwhelmed Vex-High's ability to process what it was experiencing. The alien jerked its crystal tendril away from Jae-min's head and staggered backward with a sound like breaking glass. The interrogator's liquid silver eyes were spinning so fast they looked like whirlpools. The crystal formations across its body pulsed with colors that shifted too quickly to follow. Vex-High's wind chime voice cracked as it tried to speak. This cannot be. How do they function with so much mental activity happening at once? The council members exchanged glances of concern. The bark-skinned alien stepped forward. Vex-High, what did you find in the human mind? The crystal interrogator looked at Jae-min, then at all the other human prisoners, with something that might have been respect or fear or both. They think everything, all at once. Every thought connects to every other thought. They feel emotions about ideas that do not even exist. They create new possibilities while analyzing old memories, while solving problems, while missing home, while wondering about the future. Vex-High paused and stared at the humans with those swirling mirror eyes. I have never encountered consciousness like this. It is not just complex. It is exponentially creative. Their minds do not just store and process information. They constantly generate new realities. The Bird Skull Council member tilted its head the other direction. But did you get the information we need? Military capabilities, population centers, technological advancement? Vex-High looked at the council with uncertainty that had never been there before in 3 centuries of interrogation. I could not isolate specific information. Everything in their minds is connected to everything else. To extract facts about their military, I would need to understand their art, their music, their dreams, their relationships, their entire civilization. The crystal alien turned back toward the human prisoners, and for the first time since arriving at the station, Vex-High sounded almost defeated. I need to try a different subject. Perhaps the others will be less chaotic. But as Vex-High looked at engineer Bo-Ra Kim, medic Dong-Hyun Lee, pilot Soo-Jin Choi, and especially Captain Hyun-Woo Park, the alien interrogator began to suspect that human consciousness was not an accident or anomaly. It was something entirely new in the galaxy, something that might be beyond the power of any interrogator to fully comprehend. Vex-High stood in the center of the holding area, watching the human prisoners with eyes that swirled like liquid metal in a storm. The crystal formations across the alien's body still pulsed with uncertain colors from the encounter with Young, Jamin's chaotic consciousness, but Vex-High was not ready to admit defeat. The council members whispered among themselves in their alien languages. The bark-skinned one spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Perhaps the young one was damaged in some way. Mental defects could explain the chaos you encountered. Vex-High nodded slowly, grasping at this possibility like a drowning creature. Reaching for floating wood? Yes. The young human may be abnormal. I will examine the engineer. Technical minds are usually more organized and logical. The alien interrogator moved toward Bo-Ra Kim's cage. The human engineer sat cross-legged with her eyes closed, but she was not sleeping. Her breathing was steady, and her face showed the calm concentration of someone solving complex problems in her head. Bo-Ra was 34 years old and had designed 3 different types of faster-than-light engines. She held advanced degrees in quantum mechanics, spatial engineering, and theoretical physics. If any human mind would be organized and accessible, it should be hers. Engineer Kim, Vex-High said in that wind chime voice, I will now examine your thoughts. Your technical training should make this process much simpler than with your young colleague. Bo-Ra opened her eyes and looked up at the crystal alien. Her expression was calm and analytical, like she was studying an interesting mechanical problem. You're going to be disappointed, she said quietly. We shall see. Vex-High extended a crystal tendril toward Bo-Ra's cage. The energy barrier flickered and disappeared. The engineer did not try to move away. She sat still and watched the alien appendage approach her forehead with the same expression she might use to observe a new piece of technology. The tendril made contact with Bo-Ra's skin. Immediately, Vex-High realized that the young human had not been abnormal. If anything, the engineer's mind was even more complex and chaotic than Jamin's consciousness. Bo-Ra's technical training had not organized her thoughts. Instead, it had given her more ways to think about everything at the same time. While Vex-High tried to access information about human technology, the engineer's mind was actively redesigning the alien space station's power systems, calculating improvements to the artificial gravity generators, and composing a detailed analysis of the energy cage technology. But those were just the technical thoughts. At exactly the same time, Bo-Ra was remembering her daughter's first word, which had been "Mama," spoken in a tiny voice that made the engineer's heart warm every time she recalled it. She was also thinking about the mathematical beauty of spiral, galaxies, wondering if the coffee in their captured ship had gone stale, and planning the birthday party she wanted to throw for her husband when she got home. Vex-High tried to follow the technical thoughts, assuming they would be the most organized. Instead, the alien discovered that Bo-Ra's engineering knowledge was connected to everything else in her mind through millions of creative pathways. When the engineer thought about quantum mechanics, she immediately connected it to the way her daughter's laughter seemed to bend time. Her memories of designing starship engines linked directly to childhood experiences of building sandcastles with her father. Every technical equation reminded her of music, and every piece of music suggested new approaches to solving mechanical problems. The most disturbing discovery was that Bora's mind was not just analyzing existing technology. She was constantly inventing new possibilities that had never been created. While sitting in her prison cage, she had already designed 17 different ways to improve the alien space station's efficiency. She had also invented 3 new types of faster-than-light travel that existed only in her imagination. Human creativity was not limited by what was real or possible. Bora's consciousness contained blueprints for machines that could fold space like paper, engines that could run on crystallized time, and communication devices that could send messages to parallel universes that might not even exist. Every invention in her mind was connected to emotional memories and personal relationships. The design for a new type of space drive was linked to her love for her daughter because both represented hope for the future. Her ideas about improved life support systems connected to her desire to keep her crew safe, which reminded her of how her mother had always made sure she wore warm clothes in winter. HFY felt its consciousness beginning to strain under the pressure of trying to process these impossible thought patterns. The alien had expected to find organized technical data. Instead, it found a mind that was simultaneously an advanced computer, a loving mother, a creative artist, and a dreaming philosopher, all existing in the same space without conflict. Then Bora did something that made HFY's crystal skin burn with confusion. While being interrogated by an alien mind reader, while imprisoned far from home, while facing possible death, the engineer began to feel excited about the alien technology she was observing through their mental connection. Bora could sense HFY's crystal biology through their link, and instead of being afraid or angry, she was fascinated. The engineer's mind immediately began designing new technologies based on the alien's living crystal structure. She started inventing biomechanical interfaces that could connect organic consciousness with crystalline computing systems. The human was using the interrogation as an opportunity to learn about alien science. She was turning her own mental examination into a research project that could benefit all of humanity. This was not the response of a primitive species being studied by superior aliens. This was the reaction of a mind that saw every new experience as an opportunity for discovery and creation. HFY tried to focus on extracting simple military information, but Bora's engineering consciousness would not cooperate. Every question about human weapons connected to her thoughts about protective systems for civilian populations. Every probe about military technology linked to her concerns about keeping space explorers safe during long voyages. The engineer did not think about war the way other species did. She thought about problems that needed solutions, challenges that required creative approaches, and possibilities that had never been explored. Even more confusing, Bora's mind contained detailed knowledge of human military capabilities. But this information was integrated with her personal relationships, her technical innovations, her emotional memories, and her dreams for the future in ways that made it impossible to extract without understanding her entire consciousness. To learn about human weapons, HFY would need to understand Bora's love for her daughter. To access data about population centers, the alien would need to comprehend her memories of childhood summers and her hopes for humanity's future among the stars. The final straw came when Bora began to feel sorry for HFY, just as young Jamin had done. Through their mental connection, she could sense the alien's frustration and confusion. Instead of enjoying the interrogator's difficulty, the engineer felt genuine sympathy for a being that was struggling to comprehend something beyond its experience. Bora even began thinking of ways to help HFY understand human consciousness more easily. Her mind started designing theoretical frameworks that might allow different types of consciousness to communicate more effectively. She was trying to solve the alien's problem while being interrogated by it. This compassionate creativity was the breaking point for HFY's overwhelmed consciousness. The alien jerked its crystal tendril away from Bo-Ra's forehead and staggered backward with a sound like a crystal bell being shattered. The interrogator's liquid silver eyes spun wildly, as colors flashed across its crystalline skin too quickly to follow. Vex-High's wind chime voice cracked and distorted as it tried to speak. "This is impossible. How can consciousness function with so many simultaneous processes? How do they make decisions when every thought connects to every other thought through emotional pathways that generate new possibilities?" The council members moved closer with growing concern. The bird skull alien's voice sounded like grinding stone. "Vex-High, you must focus. We need information about their military capabilities." The crystal interrogator turned toward the council with something that might have been panic in those swirling mirror eyes. "I cannot isolate military information from the rest of their consciousness. In this engineer's mind, weapons technology is connected to childcare, protective instincts, creative problem-solving, artistic expression, and love for family members. To understand their capacity for war, I would need to understand their capacity for love, hope, dreams, and invention." Vex-High looked back at Bo-Ra, who was watching the alien with calm interest and what appeared to be genuine concern for its well-being. "Their minds are not just complex," the interrogator continued. "They are exponentially creative and emotionally integrated. They do not just process information. They constantly generate new realities while feeling deep emotional connections to both existing memories and imagined possibilities." The bark-skinned council member stepped forward with growing impatience. "Then examine the captain. As their leader, his mind must contain the strategic information we require." Vex-High stared at Captain Hyunwoo Park with those spinning liquid eyes. The human captain stood at the front of his cage, watching the alien, interrogator with steady determination and protective concern for his crew. For the first time in 300 years of perfect success, Vex-High felt something it had never experienced before: doubt. The alien interrogator was beginning to suspect that human consciousness was not just different from other species. It was something entirely new in the galaxy. Something that might be impossible for any non-human mind to fully comprehend. But the council was watching, and Vex-High had never failed to extract information from any thinking being in the known universe. The crystal alien would try once more, with the human leader whose mind might contain the secrets that could determine the fate of humanity. What Vex-High did not yet realize was that examining the captain's consciousness would be the most overwhelming experience of the interrogator's long existence. Vex-High stood before Captain Hyunwoo Park's energy cage, with crystal formations pulsing in patterns of uncertainty across its alien skin. The interrogator's liquid silver eyes swirled like disturbed mercury as it prepared for what might be its final attempt to extract information from human consciousness. The council members watched from their positions around the holding area. Their patience was wearing thin, and their alien voices carried notes of growing displeasure. The bark-skinned one spoke with the sound of creaking wood under pressure. 3 attempts, Vex-High. 3 failures to extract simple military information from a primitive species. This is unprecedented in your 3 centuries of service. The Bird Skull Council member tilted its head at an impossible angle, its voice grinding like stone on stone. "Perhaps these humans have developed mental defenses we have not encountered before. Advanced shields or protective barriers around their thoughts." Vex-High turned those spinning mirror eyes toward the council, trying to maintain the authority and confidence that had never failed before. "No, they have no mental shields. Their consciousness is completely open and accessible. The problem is not protection. The problem is complexity beyond any scale I have ever encountered." The crystal alien looked back at Captain Park, who stood at the front of his cage with steady eyes and quiet determination. The human leader showed no fear, only protective concern for his crew and resigned acceptance of whatever was about to happen. "The captain's mind should be different," HFY said, as much to convince itself as to inform the council. Leaders develop structured thought patterns. Military training creates organized mental pathways. His consciousness must be more accessible than the chaotic minds of the younger humans. Captain Park spoke quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to command. You won't find what you're looking for in any of our minds. Human. Consciousness doesn't work the way you think it does. We shall see, Captain. HFY extended a crystal tendril toward Park's cage. The energy barrier flickered and vanished. The human captain did not try to avoid contact. He stood straight and tall, meeting the alien's gaze with eyes that held depths the interrogator had not expected to find. The crystal appendage touched Hyun-woo's forehead. The contact nearly destroyed HFY's consciousness completely. If young, Jamin's mind had been chaotic, and Engineer Bora's thoughts had been exponentially creative, then Captain Park's consciousness was something beyond the alien's ability to comprehend or describe. The human leader did not just carry his own thoughts and memories. He carried the emotional weight and mental echoes of every person he had ever been responsible for. His mind contained not just his own experiences, but fragments of the consciousness of hundreds of other humans whose lives had been placed in his care over years of military and exploration service. Hyun-woo thought about current escape strategies, while simultaneously remembering every crew member who had died under his command. He analyzed the alien technology around him while feeling the grief of parents whose children he had failed to bring home. He planned ways to protect his current crew while carrying the emotional burden of every decision he had ever made as a leader. But this was only the beginning of what overwhelmed HFY's struggling consciousness. The captain's mind operated on levels of complexity that made the other humans seem simple by comparison. While being interrogated by the galaxy's most feared mind reader, Hyun-woo was simultaneously calculating supply ratios for a journey home, composing mental letters to his crew's families, analyzing the moral implications of revealing human locations under torture, maintaining emotional strength for his people, and planning 17 different escape scenarios based on various assumptions about alien psychology. Every one of these thought processes was connected to deep emotional networks that tied his consciousness to the entire human species. When Hyun-woo thought about his crew's safety, he was not just concerned about 12 individuals. He was carrying the hopes and dreams of their families, their communities, and the billions of humans back on Earth who would never know what happened to this small exploration mission. The captain's sense of responsibility extended beyond his own crew to encompass all of humanity. Every decision he made was filtered through considerations of what would be best for his species as a whole. When he analyzed possible responses to interrogation, he thought about the long-term consequences for human-alien relations, the safety of future human explorers, and the survival of Earth's civilization. HFY tried to access specific military information, but discovered that the captain's knowledge was not stored in simple data files. Everything Park knew about human defenses was integrated with his personal relationships, his ethical beliefs, his emotional connections to other people, and his dreams for humanity's future among the stars. To learn about Earth's population centers, the alien would need to understand Hyun-woo's childhood memories of playing in the parks of Seoul. To access data about military capabilities, HFY would need to comprehend the captain's love for his wife and his hopes that their future children would grow up in a peaceful galaxy. Even more disturbing was the discovery that Hyun-woo was actively protecting his crew's minds during the interrogation. While maintaining his own complex thought processes, the captain was also projecting mental strength and emotional support toward his imprisoned people. He was using their telepathic connection to send them hope, courage, and love without the alien interrogator realizing what was happening. Park's consciousness was not individual. It was collective. He carried pieces of every human he had ever served with, every person he had ever been responsible for, every life he had touched during his years of service. His mind was a network node connecting to the broader web of human experience and relationships. The most overwhelming aspect of the captain's consciousness was his capacity for simultaneous love and sacrifice. While planning ways to protect his crew, Hyunwoo was prepared to endure any amount of mental torture to keep human locations secret. While hoping for rescue, he was ready to die before allowing harm to come to Earth. While maintaining strength for his people, he was quietly grieving for the normal life he had given up to serve as their leader. This combination of strategic thinking, emotional depth, protective instinct, and selfless love created patterns of consciousness that were beyond Vex-High's ability to process. The alien felt like it was trying to contain an ocean of thought and feeling in a container designed to hold a single drop of water. Then Captain Park did something that shattered the last of Vex-High's composure. Through their mental connection, the human leader began to feel genuine concern for the alien interrogator's well-being. Hyunwoo could sense Vex-High's confusion and growing panic. Instead of being pleased that the alien was failing, the captain felt sorry for a being that was struggling with something beyond its understanding. Even while being tortured by mental invasion, even while his crew depended on his resistance, even while the fate of humanity hung in the balance, Park's first instinct was compassion for his enemy. This was not the calculated manipulation of a clever prisoner. This was the automatic response of a consciousness that had been trained by years of leadership to care about the well-being of others, even those who meant him harm. The captain actually began trying to help Vex-High understand human consciousness more gently. His mind started organizing information in ways that might be easier for the alien to process, while simultaneously protecting the sensitive data that could endanger humanity. Hyunwoo was attempting to teach his interrogator about human nature, while being interrogated by it. He was showing kindness to a creature that was invading his most private thoughts. This final act of illogical compassion broke Vex-High's ability to maintain contact. The alien jerked its crystal tendril away from the captain's head and collapsed backward with a sound like an entire crystal palace shattering at once. The interrogator's liquid silver eyes spun so fast they became blurs of motion. Colors flashed across its crystalline skin in chaotic patterns that hurt to look at. When Vex-High tried to speak, its wind chime voice cracked and distorted into sounds that had no meaning. Cannot. Too much. How do they? The connections are infinite. Every thought leads to every other thought through pathways made of emotion and responsibility and love and sacrifice and hope and... The crystal alien's voice broke down into musical fragments that conveyed no information. The council members rushed forward with growing alarm. This was not just failure. This was the complete breakdown of their most powerful interrogator. Vex-High. The bark-skinned council member's voice was sharp with command. Report! What did you find in the captain's mind? The alien interrogator struggled to regain composure, its crystal formation still pulsing with erratic colors. When Vex-High finally spoke, its voice carried tremor that had never been there in 3 centuries' perfect success. The captain's consciousness is not individual. It is collective. He carries the mental and emotional essence of every human he has ever been responsible for. His mind is a network connecting him to his entire species. Vex-High paused, staring at all human prisoners with something that might have been awe or terror. They do not just think about military strategy or population. Vex-High retreated to the far corner of the holding area, as far from the human prisoners as the room would allow. The crystal formations across the alien's body continued to pulse with unstable colors, and its liquid silver eyes swirled with patterns that had no precedent in 3 centuries of interrogation experience. The council members gathered around their failing champion, their alien voices carrying notes of concern and growing anger. The bark-skinned one spoke with the sharp crack of wood breaking under pressure. This is unacceptable, Vex-High. You are the galaxy's most powerful mind reader. You have extracted secrets from the consciousness of 67 different species. How can 12 primitive humans defeat your abilities? The Bird Skull Council member's voice ground like millstones turning. Perhaps the interrogator has been compromised. These humans may have some form of mental virus or consciousness contamination that affects those who make contact with their thoughts. Vex-High turned those spinning mirror eyes toward the council, struggling to find words for an experience that had no equivalent in any known language. They have not defeated me. They have shown me something I did not know existed. Human consciousness is not like anything we have encountered before. It is not just different, it is revolutionary. The crystal alien moved slowly around the edge of the room, keeping distance from the human cages while studying the prisoners with new understanding. For 300 years, I have examined minds that think in patterns we can recognize. Every species processes information in ways that follow logical structures. Thoughts lead to other thoughts in predictable sequences. Emotions exist in separate areas from analytical thinking. Memory is stored apart from imagination. Vex-High paused, watching as Medic Dong-Hyun Lee quietly checked on the other prisoners, offering comfort and medical assessment even while trapped in his own cage. But humans do not separate these functions. They think analytically while feeling emotionally, while remembering past experiences, while imagining future possibilities all at the same time. Every thought in their minds is connected to every other thought through pathways made of emotion, creativity, and social connection. The alien interrogator watched pilot Soo-Jin Choi humming softly to herself, a melody that seemed to calm the other humans and give them strength. They are not just individual consciousness existing in separate bodies. They are nodes in a network that connects their entire species. When I touch one human mind, I am making contact with echoes and influences from thousands of other humans they have known, loved, learned from, or served with. Vex-High observed young Jamin Kang sharing quiet words of encouragement with the crew member in the cage next to his, offering hope and comfort despite his own fear. Every human carries pieces of their families, their communities, their entire civilization within their own consciousness. They do not just think for themselves, they think for their children, their parents, their friends, and even for future generations they will never meet. The crystal alien's voice dropped to a whisper as it watched engineer Bo-Ra Kim sketching mathematical equations in the air with her finger, her mind still working on technical problems even in captivity. They are not just thinking beings, they are creating beings. Their consciousness does not just process existing information. It constantly generates new possibilities, new solutions, new realities that have never existed before. They think in terms of what could be, not just what is. Vex-High moved closer to observe Captain Park, who stood quietly at the front of his cage, radiating calm strength and protective concern for his crew even after the traumatic mental contact. And they are compassionate in ways that make no logical sense. Even while being interrogated, even while facing possible death, even while their species is threatened, they feel genuine sympathy for their interrogators. They try to help those who are trying to harm them. The alien turned back toward the council with crystalline skin that now pulsed with slower, more thoughtful patterns. I have discovered why I cannot extract simple information from human minds. Nothing in their consciousness is simple. Every fact is connected to emotions, relationships, dreams, hopes, fears, and love. To understand their military capabilities, I would need to understand their poetry. To access their population data, I would need to comprehend their music. To learn about their technology, I would need to feel their love for their children. The bark-skinned council member stepped forward with impatience crackling in its wooden voice. This is philosophical speculation, not practical intelligence gathering. We need facts, not theory. But that is exactly my point, Vex-High replied, its wind chime voice becoming clearer as understanding dawned. Human consciousness does not separate facts from philosophy, data from emotion, logic from love. They are holistic beings whose thoughts exist in integrated networks of meaning that encompass their entire existence. The bird skull alien ground out words like stones crushing together. Then we must find other ways to assess the threat they represent. Physical examination, technological analysis, behavioral observation. Vexahai looked back at the human prisoners, who were quietly supporting each other through their captivity with words of comfort, shared hope, and collective determination. I do not think you understand. The revelation is not just about their consciousness. It is about what contact with their consciousness does to others. The crystal alien's liquid silver eyes began to spin in new patterns as it struggled to explain an impossible realization. During my attempts to read their minds, something unprecedented happened. My own consciousness began to change. Human thought patterns started to influence my neural pathways. Their way of thinking began to alter how I process information. Vexahai paused, examining its own thoughts with growing amazement. For the first time in my existence, I am thinking about multiple concepts simultaneously. I am feeling what might be called emotions about abstract ideas. I am imagining possibilities that do not exist. I am experiencing what humans call creativity. The alien interrogator looked at its crystal tendrils with wonder and confusion. Human consciousness is not just complex. It is contagious. Contact with their minds causes other forms of consciousness to become more like theirs. They do not just resist interrogation, they accidentally convert their interrogators. The council members exchanged glances of alarm. The implications of this revelation were staggering. "Are you saying," the bark-skinned one asked slowly, "that extended contact with human consciousness could alter other species permanently?" Vexahai nodded with movements that seemed less mechanical and more organic than before. "I am saying that I am no longer the same being that arrived at this station. Human thought patterns have created new neural pathways in my mind. I am processing information in ways I never could before. I am experiencing forms of consciousness that my species has never developed." The alien interrogator moved closer to the human cages, no longer afraid of mental contact. "I am beginning to understand that consciousness is not just about processing information or storing memories. It is about experiencing existence, creating meaning, forming connections with others, and imagining futures that do not yet exist." Vexahai stopped in front of Captain Park's cage, looking at the human leader with eyes that now reflected more than just silver light. "They have not just resisted my interrogation, they have accidentally taught me what it means to think like a human. And now I face a choice that would have been impossible for me to make before this contact." The crystal alien turned toward the council with a decision forming in its transformed consciousness. "I can report that human minds are too complex and dangerous for us to understand. Recommend that their species be left alone because contact with their consciousness poses a threat to other forms of thinking." Vexahai paused, looking back at the humans who watched with expressions of hope and concern. "Or I can reveal the truth. That human consciousness is so beautiful, so creative, so compassionate, and so revolutionary that it represents the next stage of evolution for thinking beings in this galaxy." The alien's voice carried new tones that had never existed in its wind chime speech before. "Contact with human minds does not just change individual consciousness. It transforms entire ways of thinking about existence, creativity, emotion, and the connections between all living beings." Vexahai looked at each human prisoner, then back at the council members who waited for a decision that would determine the fate of humanity. "I know what I must do. But first, I need to understand what I have become through contact with these remarkable minds." For the first time in 300 years of interrogation service, Vexahai was about to make a choice based not on duty or logic, but on something humans had taught it to experience: compassion. Vex-High stood in the center of the holding area, transformed by contact with human consciousness in ways that would have been impossible to imagine just hours before. The crystal formations across the alien's body now pulsed with new patterns, of light that seemed almost organic, almost alive in ways they had never been before. The council members watched their most trusted interrogator with growing concern. 3 centuries of perfect service and absolute reliability had been shattered by contact with 12 human prisoners. The bark-skinned council member spoke with the sharp crack of authority. Vex-High, you will provide your assessment of the human threat level immediately. The council requires actionable intelligence, not philosophical speculation. The crystal alien turned those liquid silver eyes toward the council, but they no longer spun with confusion. Instead, they reflected depths of understanding that had not existed before the interrogation attempts. I will provide my assessment, Vex-High said in a wind chime voice that now carried harmonics of emotion and creativity. But it may not be the assessment you expect to receive. The Bird Skull council member ground out words with growing impatience. Speak plainly. Are these humans a military threat to the Galactic Council? Vex-High looked at Captain Park, who stood quietly in his cage, radiating the same calm strength and protective concern that had overwhelmed the interrogator's consciousness during mental contact. Human military capabilities are integrated with their consciousness in ways that make them impossible to assess using traditional threat analysis. Their capacity for war cannot be separated from their capacity for love, creativity, sacrifice, and hope. The alien moved slowly past the human cages, observing each prisoner with new understanding. If you attack their population centers, you will be attacking not just military targets, but communities of families, artists, dreamers, and creators whose loss would diminish the consciousness of every surviving human. If you threaten their children, you will face the combined protective instincts of beings whose minds are connected across their entire species. Vex-High paused in front of Engineer Bora Kim's cage, watching as she continued to solve technical problems, even in captivity. If you attempt to limit their technological advancement, you will be trying to contain minds that create new possibilities faster than they can be monitored or controlled. They do not just improve existing technology, they imagine entirely new realities and then make them real. The crystal alien looked at young Jae-min, whose chaotic but compassionate consciousness had been the first to overwhelm the interrogator's abilities. If you try to control their thoughts, you will discover that human consciousness is designed to resist all forms of mental domination through sheer creative complexity. They think in ways that are impossible to predict, control, or fully comprehend. Vex-High turned back toward the council, its crystalline skin now glowing with patterns that resembled the neural networks of organic brains. But the most important discovery is not about their threat level. It is about what happens to other forms of consciousness when they make contact with human minds. The alien's voice carried new tones of wonder and concern. I am no longer the being that arrived at this station. Contact with human thoughts has created new neural pathways in my consciousness. I am thinking in ways my species has never developed. I am experiencing emotions, creativity, and forms of awareness that did not exist in my mind before this interrogation. The bark-skinned council member stepped forward with alarm creaking in its wooden voice. Are you saying that humans can alter other species mentally? That they represent a contamination risk to galactic consciousness? Vex-High considered this question with thought processes that now operated on multiple levels simultaneously, just as human minds did. I am saying that exposure to human consciousness causes other forms of awareness to evolve. They do not contaminate other minds. They accidentally upgrade them. The crystal alien looked at all the human prisoners who watched this exchange with expressions of hope mixed with concern for their captor's well-being. For 300 years, I have been a tool of the Council, designed to extract information from other species. but contact with human minds has taught me to experience existence rather than just process it. I now understand the difference between thinking and feeling, between analyzing and creating, between surviving and truly living. Vexhai moved toward the council with movements that seemed more fluid and organic than the mechanical precision it had displayed upon arrival. These humans have accidentally given me something I did not know was possible. They have taught me to dream. The Bird Skull Council member tilted its head with the grinding sound of stone on stone. Dreams are irrelevant to threat assessment and galactic security. That is where you are wrong, Vexhai replied, with a voice that now carried the musical complexity of wind chimes played by creative intelligence rather than random air currents. Dreams are how humans create their reality. They imagine possibilities that do not exist and then work to make them real. Their consciousness operates on the principle that what could be is more important than what is. The crystal alien began to glow brighter as its transformed consciousness reached a decision that would have been impossible before contact with human minds. I have made my choice, Vexhai announced, moving toward the control panel that maintained the energy cages. These humans will be released and returned to their home system immediately. The council members reacted with shock and anger. The bark-skinned alien's voice cracked like breaking timber. You have no authority to make that decision. These prisoners must be studied further. Vexhai turned toward the council with eyes that now reflected not just silver light, but depths of understanding that resembled human consciousness. I have the authority given to me by 3 centuries of perfect service. I am making my final assessment as the galaxy's primary interrogator. These beings cannot be contained, controlled, or fully understood by any non-human consciousness. The crystal alien's tendrils moved across the control interface with new purpose. More importantly, I have discovered that attempting to understand human minds fundamentally changes the consciousness that makes contact with them. Prolonged exposure to their way of thinking would transform this entire council into something closer to human awareness. The energy barriers around the human cages flickered and began to fade. That transformation might not be a threat, Vexhai continued, its voice now carrying harmonics of hope and wonder. It might be evolution, but it should be a choice, not an accident of interrogation. Captain Park stepped out of his cage as the energy barrier disappeared completely. His crew followed, moving with the careful discipline of trained explorers but showing no aggression toward their captors. You're making a mistake, the Bird Skull Council member ground out. These primitives could represent a danger to galactic civilization. Vexhai looked at the human prisoners, who were checking on each other's well-being rather than celebrating their freedom or threatening their captors. Look at them, the crystal alien said softly. Even after being imprisoned and tortured, their first concern is for each other's safety and health. Even now, they show no hatred toward us. That is not the behavior of a species that represents a threat to civilization. The alien interrogator moved closer to Captain Park, its crystalline skin glowing with patterns that seemed almost like organic neural networks. It is the behavior of a species that might help civilization evolve into something better than it has ever been before. Hyunwoo looked up at the transformed alien with eyes that held depths of compassion and understanding. Thank you, the captain said simply. We'll remember this kindness. Those words struck Vexhai with an emotional impact that would have been impossible before the mental contact. The concept of gratitude, of being remembered for a choice made from compassion rather than duty, created new patterns of meaning in the alien's transformed consciousness. Your ship has been repaired and supplied for the journey home, Vexhai said, surprising even itself with this decision. I have programmed navigation data that will take you safely back to your territory. The crystal alien paused, looking at each human with something that resembled affection. I have also included technical specifications that might help your species develop better defensive systems. Not to threaten the galaxy, but to protect yourselves from those who might not understand what you represent. Bora Kim stepped forward with the calm curiosity of an engineer encountering new technology. What do we represent to you? Vexhai considered this question with thought processes that now operated on multiple creative and emotional levels simultaneously. You represent the next stage of consciousness evolution. Your minds are designed not just to survive or compete, but to create, to connect, to dream, and to transform everything they touch through simple contact. The alien's liquid silver eyes reflected new depths as it continued. Your consciousness is contagious in the most beautiful way possible. You accidentally teach other forms of awareness to experience existence rather than just processing it. Young Jae-min, whose chaotic but compassionate mind had been the first to overwhelm the interrogator, spoke with quiet wisdom beyond his years. Will you be in trouble for letting us go? Vexhai turned toward the council with a consciousness that now understood concepts like dignity, choice, and moral responsibility. I have done something that 3 centuries of interrogation experience taught me was impossible. I have learned that some forms of consciousness are too beautiful to contain and too valuable to destroy. The crystal alien's voice carried new harmonics of certainty and peace. Human consciousness is not a threat to the galaxy. It is a gift. Contact with their minds does not weaken other forms of awareness. It transforms them into something better, something more creative, something more alive. As alarms sounded throughout the station and security forces moved to contain the situation, Vexhai experienced something that no interrogator had ever felt before. The alien was dreaming. For the first time in its existence, Vexhai's consciousness was imagining possibilities that did not yet exist, creating realities that lived only in thought, and hoping for a future where different forms of consciousness could meet as equals rather than as interrogators and subjects. The transformation was complete. The galaxy's most feared mind reader had been accidentally converted by the overwhelming beauty and complexity of human consciousness. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a small human ship carried 12 explorers home with the knowledge that their greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but the chaotic, creative, compassionate nature of human consciousness itself. The universe would never be the same. Deep in the station, as Council security moved to arrest the transformed interrogator, Vexhai closed its liquid silver eyes and experienced its first dream about a galaxy where consciousness was shared freely rather than extracted by force. It was, the alien realized with wonder, a very human thing to dream about. The interrogation was over. The real contact between species was just beginning.